I'll start. When we talked about what we would do, we wanted to come up with something fairly general so that we could make this useful to the widest audience. So along the way, we're going to present a couple of things and talk about some things we know, but really it's going to be most useful if you guys are willing to talk, ask questions, or interact too, because you guys may have different agendas and you have your own expertise. So we really want to make this interactive. So at any point you have a question, you disagree, you want to make a comment, just feel free to do that, because that would be the preference.
Yeah, definitely. And even if we're in the middle of a topic, don't wait till, we wrap it up. Please raise your hand, and we really covet what you have to say.
So when we talked about the concept of helping your kids deal with stress, the code word there, or the word that goes with that, usually is anxiety, okay? And I've been a psychologist for almost 30 years now, and in the last 5 to 10 years, everybody is constantly asking me, other doctors, parents, they say, so are you seeing an increase in anxiety disorders? Or what's the most significant thing you see right now? And the answer is anxiety disorders, okay? And so I wanted to go and refresh my memory and look up some factoids. There's really good demographic data on mental health in our country nationally, because there's several surveys that get done every year on adults, on college students, and on kids through National Institutes of Mental Health and a whole bunch of other avenues. So these are fairly reliable data that get tracked over time. And what it allows us to do is not just collate the data, but it allows us to compare generations. So when you talk about the end of the baby boom and Gen X and Gen Y and millennials, we're able to kind of track that. So, literally in the last decade, for the most diagnosed mental health disorders, anxiety disorders for kids have overtaken depression. And that's significant when you used to see the disparities between the two. So just for adults, in any given year, 18% of adults in America would qualify as fitting the criteria for some anxiety disorder. And there's lots of different anxiety disorders. But 18%, okay? And in their lifespan, adults, probably somewhere close to 30% will have met the criteria. What, really? Will have met the criteria for an anxiety disorder. So for kids, 6 to 17, okay, in any given year, 30% of girls will have met the criteria for an anxiety disorder, okay? 20% of boys, okay? Does anybody, what do you think of that? Seems like a lot to me. But what's really interesting with adults, only about 40% of adults will actually seek active treatment for their anxiety disorder, okay? 40%. And for kids, 20%. So the kids we end up seeing either in my office or in the school counseling office, it may be only a small subset of what's really going on out there. That's why this data is so amazing. And the most rapid increase over time has been since 2007 to 2015. Now what's happened in that specific time frame? Social media, the phone in your hand, online activity, and everybody's got one in their pocket, right? So I'm not saying that's the cause, and I suspect we're going to end up talking a lot about that sort of thing because it's ubiquitous and everybody's probably got stories. The other factoid is this: overt suicide, not suicide attempts, okay, but suicide in the 15 to 19-year-old age category in that time, 07 to 015, there's a 40% rise. That's a phenomenal number. We haven't seen that in decades, probably almost ever. And that's 15 to 19. In the 12 to 14-year age range, there's a 50% rise. Okay? And in this town, we have a number of kids, in that 11 to 14. When I first came here 20 plus years ago, in the mid-90s, there was a contagion of a bunch of middle school suicides. For those, a lot of you folks didn't have kids then, and it was like 6 or 8 in the span of a year or two. So to me, that's really scary. 3 times more girls, 12 to 14, committed suicide 07 to 015 than prior. 3 times. I mean, these are numbers that, so sadly, they're closing the gender gap, because you probably know men are more successful in suicide, even though women attempt it more frequently. Men tend to use more lethal means. But a 3 times increase is just unbelievable. And it does correspond to some degree with what I see in my office, okay? And the distinction of anxiety and depression is this. If somebody is clinically depressed as an adult or a kid, you will have significant anxiety as part of your depression. That's just reality. The converse is not true. You can be an anxious person globally or specifically and not be a depressed person. But if you have that anxiety long enough and deep enough and hard enough, and you will probably become depressed at some point. That's why treating anxiety and dealing with this and stress proofing or helping your kids be more resilient is really an important topic. I'll throw it over to you guys. Why did everybody come tonight? It's a good crowd. Why did everybody come tonight? Why is this a topic?
Part of our society now.
It's societal. It's not just our kids, it's us. Okay? And they're always watching. That hasn't changed a bit. What else? Why else?
I work in a high school.
You work in a high school. And do you have kids as well?
Adult.
Okay, as adults. And they're doing okay? That's important to keep saying that, because for the people who are going through that now, and for those of us who remember it, our anxiety, and I'm going to throw out books because people always say, do you have any good books to read? Typically I don't give a lot of those because I'd say absorb 3 important things from what I say, but there's some really interesting books about that. When you look at your effect on your kids, the best book is called Anxious Kids, Anxious Parents. So for those of you who have a familial history, know you're an anxious person, have anxiety tracing back to adolescence, you might want to read that one. It's really useful. So, okay, I'll throw it out too, and you know, jump in here too, Theresa. Why? Why? So somebody said everybody's got a phone in their hand and social media. That's one piece. Why else? Why this increase in anxiety for our culture?
We're not learning coping mechanisms.
Okay.
Adults don't have that.
We don't, I think we struggle with the coping mechanisms, and part of that's keeping up with the changes in our society. And I would also say kind of the blind acceptance of it, because not everybody is equally stressed and struggling. There are plenty of people who do fine, and there are plenty of kids, plenty of families who have resilient kids or struggling kids, and they do well over time. What else though?
There's constant stimulation in our society.
Yeah.
Say it again.
There's constant stimulation.
Yes. And we seek it. You know, the people who know that that's not good for them tend to minimize it.
Yeah.
And a lot of your kids know that. A lot of kids, as they're getting to be teenagers, they know, they're learning, when do I need to shut it off? I mean, there is this growing, I don't know if you'd agree, I think there's this growing, not backlash, but phenomenon where some kids are really saying and recognizing, this is bad for me. I need to turn it off. I need to get away from it. Right? Doesn't mean they'll do it, but at least there's the recognition. What else?
Economic stress, as well as social pressure or social disorder like meth, and
Yep.
came in big during those years.
Yep. And I mean, 07 was the economic crash, right? So I think there's this sense of, you know, kind of some national unease, and this is very significant, and kind of some cultural unease, absolutely. What else? I think there's other stuff.
Parents stressing their kids out about competition to get into college.
Yeah, because if you don't get a good grade in AP chemistry, you won't get into a good college and get a good job and have a good life. Now be honest here, how many people have had that conversation with their kid? Come on, more than 2 people have done it. Okay. How many of your parents had that conversation with you? 2, 3, 4, okay, a few of them. Was it true? Was it? Thank you, it wasn't true. Say it again.
I said, I don't know.
Right. I'll come back to that one. And I hear that one, and I say this one all the time for those of you who've ever seen me before. I'm from the East Coast. I've lived all over the place. I've never lived in a town where more parents were more uptight about their kids' education for less reason than Fort Collins.
Hear, hear.
You live this every day. You get the kid end of it, right? I see it on an individual basis.
Yeah. What about, one of the things that I'm thinking of is, I have 4 kids that they're grown, but just barely, right? They're in their 20s and early 30s. And when they were growing up, in their formative years, we had truly 4 channels on the TV. We had 2, 4, 7, and 9, I think. 2, 4, 7, and 9, is that right? Okay. So, and one of the things that when something happened in the world, they would have, you would know, and when I was little, JF Kennedy died, right? And my mom was crying, and she told me, but she only told me once. And then I never heard anything about it. I didn't see the blood, the guts, I didn't see, I didn't see that. But now today, if we think about our media, it's very, very different. And so I wonder if that might be adding to some of the anxiety. I know it is mine.
It keeps coming back a lot to tech and media and the exposure to it. And if you were ever going to design a system that would create anxiety and obsession, you couldn't do any better than a phone, than a cell phone enabled to, seriously. And yet we're all, and it's shifted in not even 10 years. Literally, it used to be in the high schools, I don't want to see it, don't get it out. If I do, I'll take it. It could go in the Friday box. And what it has shifted to, how many teachers in the room? What's your policy in the classroom? What do you do?
I don't let them
Okay, good for
see.
you.
And I don't have my cell phone in my room.
Okay.
What grade? What grade?
9.
Okay.
How do they respond? What do they do?
They try to hide it,
Try to get away with
but
it.
I also don't have mine. I think a lot of the teachers in my school will bring their own in the class and they'll spend time on it.
Oh, absolutely. So what I've seen is it shifted from all of those things to don't disturb anybody,
Right.
right?
I have second graders bringing their phones, and then they want to answer it because it's their mom.
Well, and the flip side is in the parent, and the mom yesterday said that we were talking about his grades and whatever else, and he's like 13, and he's constantly in this thing like a little crackhead, right? And the mom's saying, but he has to have it because I have to be able to get in touch with him.
Right.
How many of you had a cell phone in elementary school or junior? So this idea, right, that they won't be okay if they don't have it.
They can hold it off.
Mr. Ronan, what's your policy?
Fourth grade, so it's not an issue at our school.
Mr. Kinnear?
I have juniors and seniors, and I just, every now and then have to tell them to put it away.
Okay.
They're almost like adults.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and you want to treat them that way and they'll have that experience. I think if I were a teacher, I would want to maybe have at the beginning of the year, I think I'd try to have a conversation with them about what do you guys want this classroom to be like, what do I want, because it's an issue of respect and all those other things. And I have kids in the middle of a session. One of three things happens. They get a, you can hear their phone buzz, and some of them will go, I'll get that later. Pretty good. Some of them will go, this is important, can I do this? And some will just go, and some will keep doing that. And when they do that, I just get up and go to my computer and start doing something to make a point. And my back is to them, and they'll eventually go, I've had a couple don't say a word. It's not going to be real useful to them.
How long does that go on?
As long as it goes on, exactly. It goes on until it doesn't, because it's them. And I'm not trying to be jerky to them, but if this is important to you, they get the point, but the vast majority actually don't get it out, which is what's cool. Kids want the connections. Kids want...
Yeah.
I asked 2 girls today, I knew I was coming here tonight, I asked 2 girls today, we were talking about parental rules, use of cell phones, things like that. I asked them, I'm going to see, some large group of parents tonight, what do you think I should tell them about your privileges with phone in general? I got 2 diametrically opposed views. One girl said, they should just trust us, they should let me do more, they shouldn't be so uptight, I can handle it, it'll be fine. The other one said, probably need some rules, we're not totally equipped to handle it, we can get into bad things, right? Here's the ultimate irony. The girl who said I should have freedom is very close to her parents. The girl who said I need rules, regulations, connection, want more, is not close to her parents. All the teachers are smiling. What does that tell you? This is not the norm, right? And it's always weird that we go in and talking about that so much. I want to go back because I had a couple more on here. Why else are we in the age of anxiety? Expectation. And a lot of it is the educational, the performance, and I think there are certain things in, white middle class America that might be different than if you live in an inner city or back east in Philly and, where you and I come from, John. It's a little different, What about the immediacy on the news and mass shootings? Does that how many of us when we were little, I'm the end of the baby boom, how many people had mass shooting drills when you were a kid? Anybody in here? Not a single person. You did?
No. I question whether the number of mass shootings has changed that much, or whether the
Reporting.
publicity and the awareness of the mass shootings has changed. I don't know. I don't have
I don't either,
No,
yeah.
the numbers are, like, if you look at a plot line like this, it's like this. And if you look at every other country, they're down here. So there's a peculiar thing, and it's not really about guns, okay? I mean, it is or it isn't, no matter what. It's about our culture. We live in a really, really crazy culture, okay? And don't acknowledge that stuff. So my point will be, as we just get swept along into phones and culture and doing this, I mean, the idea of we are going to practice, and in the elementary schools, you don't tell them they're active shooter drills, right? Right? You know,
No.
what do you tell them they are? Lockdown. And when the bright little Johnny, like I had in my office this morning, who's 6, and he goes, "Why are we doing this?" What do you tell him?
Somebody probably is running from the police in the neighborhood. I
Okay.
can make something up that's not immediate, but we're just going to make sure we're safe.
Right. Wonder if they believe it. Well, your own kid. I mean, and that's the thing. We have to say, you know, well, if a bad person comes, we have to make ourselves safe. I mean, I think you can tell a 7-year-old, a 9-year-old, a 12-year-old, a 15-year-old the honest truth in a way that they can understand. Because what I know is if they see an incongruence between what you say and how you look, they're going to pick up on it, like your own kids do. Boy. So the mass shooting thing is, you know, it's just unbelievable. How do the teenagers respond to it in the schools? How, for you guys who are teachers again, how do they respond to that? Do they joke about it? Some of them are highly anxious about it, I'm here to tell you. I mean, fire drill, you know, the noise might bother you, but we didn't have any sense that that was going to be awful. What do you hear from your kids? Or your own kids who come home? Do they say, hey, we had a mass shooter drill today?
It's becoming such a norm now. The kids don't even, they see the news, they move on to something else. Because there's going to be another one of them.
Yeah. And that's our norm.
That's our norm.
And once we accept that that's the norm, this is our culture.
I was just wondering if there's any studies about when we did bomb drills.
Yes, I was going to say, I remember first grade we had.
Many here.
Yes.
Yeah.
Did you do those? Do you remember those?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's probably anybody who was in elementary school in the early 60s, bomb drill was for nuclear bombs. And it was basically you'd go to the corner or under a desk. And
Get under your desk.
Yeah, you did under your desk. Or we would go to the corner and you got down like you were praying to Mecca. Literally, like you curled up and, you know.
So were there any studies done in the 60s about extra or additional suicides? Or
Great question. The incidence has been tracked since, one of the ones that's been done with adolescents is literally since '66. But I think all these other things weren't there, so I would bet money, it was such a remote event. These other things are immediate because some kids, some of the anxious kids, they actually go and look at these things online so they re-experience it again and again. So I don't think there was an increase because of those at all.
Hey, Dr. Mesinger, I want to go back to what Ellen said back here when she said there, I think you said there's so much stimulation, there's so many messages. And if you don't know that about, you know, sometimes I think there's this generation gap. And for those of you who haven't spent time in a middle school or a high school, one day would be all it would take. Because so much more than when we were there. Again, you know, we always like to say, well, when I was in middle school, I wasn't anxious and I didn't have any problem with my friends. But truly, by spending one day, there's so much that every water bottle, look around the room, like just look at your tables. Every water bottle, I love your water bottle, has a message on it, or, you know, like I have to get close to see if these are little words, you know. And everybody's has words on it. The Lobo napkin holder has a whole bunch of information on it. People's shirts have information on it. And then your phone's beeping, and not only beeping for the messages, but also for your emails or your Snapchat or, you know. So the amount of messages that kids get in one day of school is completely overwhelming. And we're going to wrap around, so we just want to lay out, hey, what is this anxiety about? And make sure that everybody knows, like, it's not surprising. And we are going to wrap around with some tips. But yeah, ask your kid, like, how many messages do you think you get in one day? And there is some good research on that. And I want to say that they get 6,000 messages from the time they leave their house to the time they come home. That includes bus stops, things on the side of the buses, just everywhere, everything.
Wow.
So.
Okay, well, when you said that, the emails, the, you know, all of the stuff that comes into you, I'm sitting there thinking, I don't have my email from work on my phone.
I don't either.
Because I might use it, right? That's the thing I said a long time ago, never changed it. Don't do Snapchat, obviously. So all these things you can monitor. One of the things we'll talk about is you need to be deliberate in the choices you make at home from the time they get their darn phone all the way through. This inevitability that we've embraced and end up with this fairly sick culture doesn't have to be in your home. The only thing that has to be in your home is what you decide by yourself, with your spouse, and it doesn't matter if they don't like it. Of course they won't like it, because in their mind, this is all there is. And I don't want to paint the young people as if they can't. There are plenty who use it just fine, they're not stressed, but they're doing some of the things we're talking about. They're self-limiting. You know, 10 to 20% don't spend tons of time on there and don't spend, you know, ridiculous amounts of media usage. There's a woman who, you should get every book she's ever written. Her name's Sherry Turkle, Turkle. She's a psychology professor. She's close to retirement at MIT. She has studied youth and technology her whole career, because MIT students are not only early adapters to technology, they invent a lot of it, or they go on to create companies that do invent it. And basically, she's been commenting on this stuff accurately, amazingly, and charting this transformation since the early 80s. Her first book in 1984 was called The Second Self, and it was about the use of computers. You know? She tells a great story. Go look at her TED Talk. She's a wonderful lady. I've met her at a couple of conferences. She talked about, before email was actually around, these kids wired themselves up with keyboards and monitors and walked around the Boston campus emailing each other. Right? I mean, this was, and she knew, she was looking at that point, what would this mean if this was ubiquitous? Okay, and she was entirely accurate. Second one was called Life on the Screen. This was 95, okay, when email and how we interact and all those things was firmly established. The one that blew up, that really made her famous, was 2011, called Alone Together. And it was with the digital revolution. And the latest one is called Reclaiming Conversation. Okay? It's just phenomenal to see how this one brilliant woman, with her observation of young people, has been able to track this over 40 years. You know? And it's us. I mean, it's all of us. Jump in.
Anybody, what are you thinking right now? Did we kind of just open it up and unzip it and now we have a big problem, or did we miss anything? What's going on at your house? Teens, if you're here, feel free to jump in. Yes?
Well, you did raise a big one for me in terms of being deliberate about choices and how you establish your home environment. Compliments to the 5210 people with the 2 hours a day of screen time. So, yeah, we have our environment the way we want it. Our girls are younger at the moment. They're not in teen ages, but they're those young kids acting teenagers. So anyway, we kind of have it under control for now. The pressure will rise at us. We're definitely bombarded with requests all the time and pulled in line. But I guess maybe you're going to come to it later, which is the idea, you know, I'm not a love and logic expert, but it's saying they can come at me and say, hey, we're supposed to make our own choices, and how come we can't make our own choices here?
Yeah, they're smart, aren't they?
Have to put it away or hand it
Oh, I heard that one several times from my daughter. Absolutely. Well,
we do it now in middle school, have the computer coming home, and we haven't been able to say that's, even though it's a school computer, it should be under our control. So we haven't quite rested that time into a box that we need to. So that's personally the issues that start coming up for me.
Two thoughts. When you start having that, it's like the sex talk. There is no the sex talk. It's multiple talks over time, right, as they develop. I would have multiple talks. And two things really strike me. If you have a spouse, the most important thing you can say about any behavior or rule limit is, Mom and I talked and we agreed that. They don't have to like the rule, but it's much harder to go against the rule when there's the royal we in operation. And when you have decided on that, that's the way it is. They can be mad, they can be disappointed, they can not like it, and I'll withstand a great deal of that blowback because that's okay. You can have your emotional reaction to it. but Mom and I really stick with this one and we're not there yet. And they can hear that forever, but what's intriguing is it provides a degree of security. They don't like it, but they like it.
That's the ironic part too, as well. You're raising the stress level of the household, and that's certainly true.
Yes, and what you can say is, we choose not to have that in our household because we are older, we have been through things, and we know this isn't good for us.
Yeah, different kind of stress, the generational conflict versus...
They don't know any difference. They're growing up with this, right? Everybody college age has had that in their hands since they were what, 10, 11, 12? You know, I was walking my dog through campus last spring, and classes were changing over at CSU, and I started noticing something, and I started watching. Every single girl, and I mean every single woman, had her phone either in her hand or right at the top of her skinny jeans. It was visible. Not every guy did. Okay? We know girls and boys' patterns of use. The girls use more, the girls use more frequently. We also know that the highest users, the most frequent users of social media are the most unhappy and the most anxious. So if we're not setting those limits, we're ignoring absolutely, and this data has been there for, what, 10 years now. So let me say it again. The people who use per hour, per day amount the most social media, Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook, nobody uses Facebook anymore if you're over 15. They are the most unhappy and the most anxious people. So again, going back to your point, why would we not limit that? Those are just facts. Do you let your 15-year-old play with guns? Well, some families might, or they might know how to shoot them, but there are a number of things that are lethal threats to them. Maybe this isn't lethal, but it's only one direction, too. They're only going to be doing more of this over time. There's no chance of them dying on the vine and not knowing how to use this. Most of your kids know more tech stuff than you do, right? Certainly by the time they're high schoolers. How many teachers ask their kid to solve, their students to solve something? Or what I hear from my friends who are teachers, something's going on and they say, somebody look this up, and everybody whips their phone out, right? And they're texting somebody else, they're not looking it up. How about other folks? What about the we and the in this household, and do people feel comfortable setting those rules around phones, or is it hard?
Probably heard if you're a single parent.
Yeah.
It seems so to me. You get no backup, you can't use a we, and they just hammer on you, right? What are the things they use? What do they say? Besides you're lame and that's dumb, and you know, is it like everybody else gets to, and I'm the only...
Yeah, there's that comparing, and you know, to other families, their pricing systems, and then it's more, I feel like, of a back and forth dialogue. You don't have that backup or that secondary opinion, that person to back you up. It's more you singly against them.
So besides the we, that dialogue shouldn't go on very long. Because once they engage in the dialogue 462,000 times, and occasionally we actually give in, or maybe they make it going, sometimes it's too much, and you're more likely to go there. You know, they will try to convince you, and I see this with single, you know, so I call it the deprivation hypothesis. You know, because of the way you're doing this, you're raising me wrong or bad. And for a single parent who might feel guilty or bad about other things, they go for that. Kids know how to go. They're little terrorists, right? I mean, they know how to go literally for the thing, and it's different for moms and for dads potentially. But they play up on that. And it's okay to say, I know what you're doing, it's not okay. The other one I would say is, don't get mad, don't get upset. When they're doing that more, you can say nothing. When you were mean to me or you're being disrespectful, I stop having conversations with you. It's okay to be mad about this, and I know you don't like it, but stop talking to them and don't respond. How about other folks? Is it hard to set those limits?
Well, I think more as working parents, but a lot of families have parents, both of them that work, and they're not getting home until later in the evening. So your kids have a couple of hours at home at night, and what are they going to do? And you can set all the parameters you want, but if you're not there for that 2 hours, you know, that's what they're going to do.
Right.
You know, and they're going to be on that, and you can, you know, set all the limitations that you want, but they're going to play it, and unless you have a way to figure out, you know, what they're doing or monitoring. I mean, I went to an internet safety class last night with the police department, and a lot of it is the same. A lot of what you're talking about tonight is the fact that kids, they never turn it off. It follows them everywhere. You know, somebody says something to them at school is one thing, they go home, they can forget. But if somebody puts something on a phone, they go home and they see it over and over and over and over, and it never shuts off. They just don't ever ever shut it off.
Right.
And it's that dopamine, it's that instant gratification. That's what they're addicted to. They're addicted to looking and searching and seeing things so fast, and that's just what, what happens to them is they're just, it's all about setting parameters as a parent, but how do you do that when you're not home every hour with them?
Go ahead. Well, if they've had 2 hours and I get home and then I'm going to feel really comfortable either using
Being done.
software to turn it off or saying, how many people have kids, be honest, do their kids sleep with their phones? There's a lot more than that, guys. To me, that's an absolute, you shouldn't do it, right?
Yeah, I beg of you. And it's okay to say there's a new sheriff in town. That's my favorite line. Those of you who have kids that are younger, who are here tonight, start now, because it's way easier, right, for high school parents, it's way easier to set those limits when they're 8, 9, 10 than it is when they're 16. But still, it's okay to say, hey, there's a new sheriff in town, and I went and listened to Dr. Mesinger, and he had some great ideas, and I'm really excited about them. And so they sound like this, and it's how you deliver it too, right? I just told you about how many messages they get during school, and we all know that kids are more anxious than we were. So make it fun. Guess what? This is what we're going to do. You got your 2 hours. I'm sure you got your 2 hours of screen time before I got home. But when I'm home, we're just going to turn things off. And if you want to check in before you go to bed, I'm making this up. If you want to check in before you go to bed, hey, I'll give you 15 minutes to do that. But then I have this cool basket that I sleep with, and it has all the electronics in it. And if there's any electronics plugged in their room, it's okay. You are the sheriff. You get to go in and you say, oh, and you know what? He told us to, don't use my name. He told us to, that.
Kids do this in reverse. Well, Dr. Mesinger said you guys should
Yeah.
wrong. And the parents will literally sometimes call me or ask, did you say this? Did you tell them it was okay? First of all, are you serious? And second of all, even if I said that was my opinion, you're the parent. You get to say he's an idiot. Or that doesn't fly here.
Yeah. I saw a hand in the back. I think it's going to be a retort, and I'll hear it. Yeah. Yeah, thank you.
The incongruence of do what I do rather than do what I say, not what I do. That's reality. Because if you poll adults and their habits, how many people use their phone as their alarm? Raise your hand. So it's right by your bed. Okay? How many people the first thing they do when they get up is check email? Or news? Or Facebook? Okay, and if you're doing those things, this is ubiquitous. That's why I say, so it's not just that they have access to it. App designers, right? Every software engineer in the world who works for any of these places is writing code and systems to make these things more addictive. I'll try to teach teens how they do those things. So when you put something out on Instagram and the likes start trickling in, that stuff is actually controlled by how frequently they send it to you. So they know, if you remember your Psychology 101, and the rat's pushing the bar for different reinforcement schedules, what they do is they release the likes at a certain speed so that you keep coming back for more. And I'll tell this to teens, and some of them get pissed. What? You mean I'm getting more? They don't know that, but that's the world we're going in. So there is a design for this to make it ubiquitous and that we can't put it down. And we just shuffle along.
So I have a question. So if we kind of accept that our kids are going to communicate with each other, not by calling, but by texting, if they're going to ask each other questions about homework or make plans for lunch the next day, and if we're going to make carpool plans or notify of changes and so on. Basically, if we accept that our phones are the way that we're going to reach out to the rest of the world, what would be, given that, what would be, say, an optimal kind of environment to shoot for in your home with everybody's home?
Optimal. To achieve what goal? To reduce your highly anxious kid and their upset, or to just raise a kid who's, so that's kind of individual.
Yeah, well, both then, right? Like, so let's assume you're sailing along, but you say, I'm on my phone a little too much, my kids are on their phones a lot too much. What should we strive for, without a problem? And then, let's say we have a kid who's feeling kind of anxious, what should we strive for in that case?
I'll give a couple of globals and then you can give specifics if you want. The global, I would say, is shoot for less.
Okay.
That's one. Absolute parameters where they won't do it. And then it's an opportunity to go do other things, right? I'm going to talk a little bit about some authors who are talking about some other really recent trends in the last 5-6 years. So like the bedtime thing and the not at the dinner table thing, but if we're not willing to do those, it's a drop in the bucket.
Right, so would we say, okay, so we're gonna have dinner and we're gonna do homework, and at 7:30, everybody check their phones? And
I would, I mean-
away at 8, I mean, that seems like a...
Yeah, my daughter's in her late 30s, so she literally got a cell phone probably junior, senior in high school. They were not internet enabled, they didn't even text. So I'm not the expert in this, and I'm kind of an imposter because I didn't have to do it. Okay? If you don't start at an early age, you're going to be behind the 8 ball always. We haven't even got to the part where they lie to you constantly. Right? None of you did with your parents, I know, but past a certain point, and I'm not talking about big sins, lies of commission. Most of younger kids' lies are lies of omission. Do you have any homework? No. Right, yeah. But these extend, because once it comes to what are you doing on the phone or where, if you are not looking at it, you have no idea where they are. What about yes,
Yeah, I appreciate that. That's exactly what I would say is, there's a new sheriff in town, but don't change everything at once, because you want to keep the relationship with your kids intact. So to me, that's really important. So you sit down with them and say, hey, I went to this seminar, or I read this book, or we've been thinking. I think the we've been thinking and we agree is really, really critical. If you have that, and if you don't, it's okay. You could even say, oh, I was talking to Grandma the other day. Listen to this. Okay, so get a team. And just little things. Hey, I think that, let's start with no phones at dinner, and we'll give them back 15 minutes before you go to bed so you can check in with any carpooling or homework things, because I know that's the way the world communicates, and your voice is like mine. It's really engaging. It's wondering how this might work with them. And then you role model for them. And we're going to get a little bit more into that. I want to kind of move away from technology into some other things, but you role model, because that's the most powerful thing you can do. And so maybe you say, hey buddy, can you grab my phone and I forgot to put it in the basket. So maybe you have this common basket that you use at your house. Hey, it's dinner time. Would you mind throwing my phone in there too? And then put it away, put it in a closet, turn them off, whatever. And same thing with bedtime, there is a such thing as an alarm clock, and provide your kids with that. That's the first thing they're going to say is, well, how am I going to get up in the morning, and how am I going to know? Yeah, we'll make sure you get up.
What would your parents have said? Probably something like, not my problem.
Yeah, I bet you'll figure it out is a great one.
I bet you'll figure it out.
Really, really good.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Brian, do you have anything else on technology? Because we have grades and problem solving and brain development.
The woman I was talking about, another writer that I just started reading, her name is Jean Twenge, Twenge. She's a psychology professor at San Diego State University. She's really prolific. She wrote a book in '09 called The Narcissism Epidemic, recognizing some trends that they were tracking for young people, and this degree of cultural and individual narcissism. Two, in 2013, was called Generation Me, with the increasing advent of social media. And then the most recent one, dig this title. It's called iGen, small I, Gen, G-E-N. Why today's super connected kids are growing up less rebellious, more tolerant, less happy, and completely unprepared for adulthood. It's pretty intriguing because, again, she's basing this on longitudinal yearly data that tracks people's use of a whole bunch of different things. And it's not just social media stuff. And every person who's a teacher, counselor, therapist will tell you that what kids are doing in their daily personal lives is changing. You got kids, I was at the DMV at 8:01 on my 16th birthday waiting to get in for my license. How many people have kids who don't really care about driving? Why? And these differences, she even talks about kids having less frequent relationships, less frequent sexual encounters, despite some of what you hear. So there's this intriguing thing that this is substituting or serving. It's a tool, it's a device, but it's not everything. So I would look at those and see what you think. I haven't looked up on video stuff for her, but I'm sure there's a bunch out there. And again, she's talking about the acceleration of all these trends essentially since 07, 08.